people out there in Flights of Foundry land. For those of you just tuning in, my name is Brandon Crilly. I'm going to be your moderator for this panel on gaming interactions, community management, and toxicity, which is an incredibly interesting and I think really dynamic and detailed topic that we're going to get into today. So to start off, I'm going to ask my two panelists here to introduce themselves, and then I'll go over the description of what the panel is, and then we'll start going through some questions, and we'll proceed from there. So in no particular order, I'm going to say, Eric, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, including what tabletop games you're playing these days or your recent favorite titles.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Eric Grove. I'm a writer with short fiction out in short fiction places. I think it's in my Flights Foundry bio. I have been playing tabletop role-playing games for over 30 years. So I started with Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition, but I quickly went back to 1st edition because 2nd edition was so new that there weren't very many supplements for it yet. And I have played every edition of D&D. I've played a lot of different games. Currently, D&D 5th edition is very common, so I find that I get involved in D&D because that's a system people are familiar with. Also, Blades in the Dark, and let's see, a variety of like indie RPGs, like the one book RPGs that are a lot of fun. I'm drawing a blank on thinking of them. It's usually a friend of mine who's much better at keeping up on this stuff on Kickstarter. We'll just be like, hey, everybody, come over. We're going to be robots.
Nice.
But yeah, those are games that I really enjoy going back a long time.
Nice. I like it. And since I'm other Brandon, Brandon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon O'Brien. I am a poet, writer, and game designer from Trinidad and Tobago. My debut poetry collection, Can You Sign My Tentacle, is out now from Interstellar Flight Press and won the 2022 Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association Elgin Award, and is available wherever you buy your poetry. I have written web fiction for stuff like Magic the Gathering and the Blue Rose RPG, and have written game content for indie games like Wonder Home and The House Doesn't Always Win. And I am one of the co-hosts of the actual play podcast Speculate, a role-playing actual play podcast for writing professionals. I have been playing a lot of Blades in the Dark and its hacks. Blades is like my favorite system, and I like tinkering with all of the other ways that other people are tinkering with it. So that's where I'm mostly at. It's been so long since I played D&D before very recently that I can't even remember the last time that I played D&D until recently joining another streamed D&D game. But indie stuff are where my brain is at right now. My two favorites right now are Blades in the Dark and Shiva by Parable Games, which is very fun if you're in the mood to play a slasher movie knowing that you're probably going to die gruesomely. So yeah.
Awesome. Dying gruesomely, rock and roll.
Well sold.
So like I said, I'm Brandon Crilly up here in Ottawa, Canada, nation's capital. I'm a novelist and games writer, among a variety of other hats. My debut fantasy novel having come out in October, as well as my first TTRPG writing credits with Fat Goblin Games, writing for their tiny D6 system. And then, again, among the various hats that I wear, I also co-host a streaming series on Twitch with fellow author Michael Underwood, where we bring authors together monthly to play one-shots of various tabletop role-playing games, try to raise money for local charities. And we're just wrapping up our second season of that right now. So a fair bit of gaming with other creative types that we do. And in terms of games that I'm playing these days, I'm in a couple of virtual groups, always with writers. One is a Star Trek Adventures game, which is light and fun and always amusing, and then the other one is what is it, Westmarch style D&D game with a bunch of other writers, which is easily the most collaboratively fun and challenging game and writing experience I've ever had in my entire life, and it has consumed the last 8 months of my life as an obsession, and I adore it. And I'll probably mention it at some point, just because as our own little mini community of players, we've very deliberately taken steps to support each other and have each other's backs and set boundaries and that sort of thing. So it'll probably come up as well. So panel, like I already said, is gaming interactions, community management, and toxicity. Just to give you the description so you kind of know what we're going to get at here. It says, what tools are there for setting a tone around the tabletop, either online or off, and managing community? How do you build community in a collaborative storytelling space while also making it clear that some interactions are simply off the table? Join us for a discussion of tools, resources, and strategies for making and keeping your gaming space thoughtfully curated. And for the purposes of this, when we say tabletop, I think we're going to focus specifically on TTRPGs, because that's common to all of our experiences. And so that's what we're going to kind of center on here. So there will be time for audience questions later on. So if you have those at any point, just drop them in the chat here with big capital letters question, and I will keep an eye out for those. And then otherwise, we're just going to kind of bounce around and cover as much related to this topic as we can. Normally, as a moderator, I try to kind of stay out of it a little bit and just ask questions, but because we're a small group, I may inject my own thoughts periodically, which I wouldn't normally do as a moderator, but it's just the three of us, so I'll do that periodically. So where I want to start, and I'm going to go to Brandon first with this, is when it comes to setting tone at your table, whether it's in person or virtual, where do you start? Like, is there an immediate first step that you take, or first considerations that you take? What's the starting point to set what you consider to be the proper tone?
So this is the first and last time that I'm gonna make this joke before I answer this question, which is, when you mean Brandon, are you referring to yourself or are you referring to me?
You. I'm gonna say Brandon Prime.
Okay, but to actually answer the question, the short answer is session 0.
Okay.
But the long answer is, I have discovered that there are multiple stages to how session 0s exist in my brain that make it easy. And when you break it up in that sense, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to establish the tone for your play group. Especially because one of my favorite tools is the TTRPG Safety Toolkit that comes with available online a consent checklist that you can send to your players so they can already establish what are the lines and veils for that game. And that is already very useful, and I like using it just for that. But the very first few times that I set it up for games that I streamed or games that I was playing with folks that I did not know before, I had this wonderful epiphany, which is, you can put descriptions in Google Forms because there's already a description on that Google form describing how the consent checklist works. I was like, what would be good? If I use that description space to let folks know this is the kind of game that we were talking about when we decided we wanted to play this system, which I thought was particularly useful and cool. For instance, for an upcoming game with an upcoming group, we were discussing playing Apocalypse Keys while the game was still in Kickstarter. So Mike, who was also Michael Underwood, who we both know, and who was also supposed to be playing in that game, had only just gotten PDF copies of it. We were just glancing at stuff in it, and I was like, this is really cool, but its touchstones are really broad. Do we want to play Men in Black, or do we want to play Hellboy, or do we want to play Control? Those are not the same things. So when I was sketching the initial story that I thought would be cool for us to play, instead of just going, let's just play this game and then just going to the rest of the consent checklist, I put in a description in that form, this is the story that we're going for, this is the tone that we're going for, these are the immediate touchstones that are significant to me, and leaving room for us to have a discussion about, are these things that you think are interesting? Like, I literally added extra questions about, is this a thing that you think is in keeping with the intention that you had for the game? Are there any other things that you wanted to add or have a conversation about, considering that tone? So that when we meet first to talk about what's already gone through the checklist, we can all mostly anonymously go, we are on the same page about what tone we want, what our touchstones are, what kind of vibe we're going for in the overall story and in our individual characters, so that nobody feels like they're along for the ride for someone else's idea of what that session is supposed to be like. And I think that that's also valuable, because not crossing someone's lines is one thing, but not giving them the game that they wanted to play when they got there is another thing. And I wanted to bridge that gap as much as possible, because it's always very difficult to give four different people the exact same thing that they thought they were getting when they signed up for the game. And I want to tighten that as much as possible before we even talk. So when we're talking, we're just talking about what we want.
No, that makes a ton of sense, especially with a game like Apocalypse Keys, like, which has the capacity to be super, super, super dark, or like almost like you said, like Men in Black, like slapstickily sort of thing, right? Like you want to make sure that you're on the same page. It's funny that the idea of setting a like a tone description, almost like comps for the game, is something I learned from Mike for Bag of Giving. So when we were sending out, all the basically list, here are the games we want to play for Bag of Giving, and so players could let us know like which games we're interested in. That's what we put in there, was a short description and a tone and whatever, so that so everybody knew right off the hop, this is, here's the title of the game, this is the direction we're thinking of putting it, or the DM wants to put it in, because we were going to get kind of a mixed bag of players, and we wanted them to know, like you said, Brandon, we wanted them to know what they were getting into. So Eric, where do you start in terms of setting tone and so forth?
Yeah, so there are kind of like two or three types of gaming groups that I end up with. One of them are people that I've known for many, many years, and there's almost just this unspoken, we don't need to really talk about it because we have a shorthand. So when I'm playing with those people, there's a shorthand, and there's also, positive and negative baggage with that group. So sometimes you have to be really clear and blunt and be like, are you going to pull that stuff that you pulled the last time? Is that going to be a problem? Or, so there's that group of people, and those conversations are just really direct. We talk really directly because we've known each other, and we don't really need to worry as much because these are friendships. Like, we've all known each other, been in each other's lives for so long that the relationship comes before the game.
Right.
The other group are, and this is actually the one that's most common, is that I find myself being the ambassador for role playing games for people who've never played role playing games a lot. Especially with writers, fellow writers, they'll find out that I do role playing games, and I'll talk to them about the value of a role playing game for learning you how to tell stories, particularly as a game master. And they'll be like, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, or I've never played X, Y, or Z. When do you want to run that game for me, Eric? And then, and a similar token, I was informed. So that's another group, is just like writers that are like, I want you to do this for me. And in those cases, I have to start by finding out what their familiarity is. Like, have you just seen like an episode of Stranger Things? Have you played any board games that have role-playing elements? Have you played video games that have role-playing elements? So there's a lot of understanding what their prior exposure is, because there is so much of role-playing games that are saturated into the culture. That's why I end up doing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, is because Dungeons and Dragons is so well known to people outside of the role-playing game space. In some cases, to the extent that, like, with these people, I'm like, well, how about we talk about Blades in the Dark instead? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, so we'll start with Dungeons and Dragons, and then we'll tell you how it differs from that.
Yeah, exactly.
The third group are people who are kind of like a hybrid between the two, and this is my most recent Dungeons and Dragons group, which was, my wife informed me that she's like, you're going to run a role playing game for me and this person, and you're going to do this, and we're going to have. And so it was like a combination of our social friends, and she's like, you're going to make this happen, Eric. Um, for all of these groups, I do pre-conversations with people, like I said, to get their sense of where they're at. But then prior to like a session zero, I'm a writer, right? Like, you know, I have a history in drama, so I write a pitch, like I write a
Oh.
pitch for my game, and I write it like I'll create a character that's like or a voice for the game. So I literally for this D&D game that I was informed that I had to run for my wife and friends, I wrote like in character, like as a guide to the setting, like
Oh,
describing
cool.
the setting to the players, and I made it a story, and then I had like a again like a 2 page uh, uh, like primer on like various things that would come up with. And because again, I can't help myself from world building, I every session I or every between every adventure I would create like story hooks that were on little pieces of paper that they drew from like a giant dice bag. So I provided a lot of flavor text, and I'm run that game kind of like an open sandbox video game, in the
Mhm.
sense that I'll throw out like 8 potential stories and I'll
Nice.
see what the players choose to do. But part of that is I set up the tone with a lot of pre-work. That's I drew.
Mhm.
I had a map created because it's a wild setting, and like I had this map of the location made up, and I did. In that case, I didn't really give people. I talked to them about what their experience was, and I said, I think I'm kind of going for this tone, and they said, okay.
Mhm.
And then I told them what I was actually going to be doing. Um,
Mhm.
for other groups, it's considerably more collaborative. Like I've done D&D. I remember when I was younger, we did a D&D game once where, and I was a player at this point. One of the game masters says, "Well, what do you want?" Somebody was like, "You know what? I've never played in a D&D game where gnomes were very prominent, so we want gnomes to be prominent, and then we
Mhm.
want this." And they threw out like all of these random things, and then the game master just sort of like, okay, so this is a kingdom ruled by gnomes, and then there's going to be giants apparently, and this is going to happen, and you want this kind of a terrain, okay, and then like put
Yeah,
it all
yeah.
together, and we did a full collaboration to even build the setting. So I've
Right.
done it like on different elements of the spectrum.
Right, right, right. No, I get that. Do you find, I'm riffing off what you just said, so that this isn't a question that I prepared. Do you find, or have you found that like, establishing tone and everything you talked about, is very different between a group made up mostly writers versus a group of non-writers, or is it fairly consistent?
I mean, writers get what you're putting down. Like they pick
Yeah,
up
fair
what you're
enough.
putting down. And then one of the things that I've communicated, because this group that's again, it's my wife and friends, but it's my wife and writing friends, and then their significant others.
Mm,
So it's like it's a combination of writers and their significant others. It's like
right.
like me, 2 writers, and then their spouses, and then my wife.
Gotcha.
And so it's like that combination. But I told them up front, I said, this is proof of concept stuff for me. If this
Yeah.
world is cool, I'm going to put this in a book.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
I'm trying this out. I have literally run. I do a lot. I'll design my own like mini games that are like
Oh,
super
nice.
stripped down. And I did one that was just I would usually do one for Halloween. So I would do a various kind of horror game
Mm,
for Halloween.
hmm.
And I'd be like, this is a trial. Like if this concept works, I'm gonna probably turn this into a book. And
Yeah,
so there's a certain amount of writers definitely understand that.
yeah.
And in the group that I do this with, these are all people that have to live with us, so they also sort of understood it by proxy. But like the general role players get it. I mean, role players that are experienced certainly pick up that stuff. If I was dealing with like coworkers that are neither writers nor experienced role players, I
Mm,
probably would go for a much simpler kind of thing. I'd
hmm.
probably be like, "You've seen Stranger Things, right?" And they'd be like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
that's what we're
Hmm.
doing."
Yeah, that was the same thing. I had a short-lived game with some teacher coworkers, and it was all people who had like, last played D&D maybe 20 years ago, and it was like, well, let's get back into it. And so yeah, you had like very streamlined kind of, ease into it sort of thing. Brandon, similar question to you. I don't know, like I only know of your gaming with other writer types, so like, do you find that tone setting has been very different group to group, like between writers and non-writers, or even just like between different groups of writers?
Um, So most of the people that I play with are all writers.
Yeah, so
I
I'm just
think
yeah.
I'm only in one group with people who aren't primarily writers, and even they have written.
Yeah.
Um, because the closest I can think of as a separate distinction from that was before I ever officially got into SFF writing,
Mhm.
I did run a couple sessions of Fiasco with a group that were all theater performers. Um
Oh.
um and while I can't like speak one to one about those things because when that happened I didn't have a lot of the tools that were available now because they didn't exist. We weren't even having those conversations yet.
Right.
But I do feel like the way that you set those stakes for people who are accustomed to storytelling in one way or another is mostly the same but in different frames.
Mhm.
So for theater folks, um, like the opening conversation is, okay, what we're about to do is improv, but instead of the audience giving you the prompts, these two math rocks are going to give you your prompts. Um, and especially using Fiasco, they kind of got it because most of Fiasco is just entirely
Yeah.
um two-person improv, and that worked for them.
Mhm.
And I feel like if you were to take a game with D&D and run it with mostly theater practitioners, um that would like that opening frame of what you're about to do is perform and just trust the rules to tell you everything else
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
would work very easily for them, and then it's just a matter of telling them this is the genre that we're going to play. Is there anything about that genre that you don't want to touch, either as a performer or for the purpose of the story that you think we're about to tell? And I think that that's a lot the same for writers, but
Mhm.
needs to open from the performance aspect instead of the story aspect, while for writers it opens with the story first, because a
Mhm.
lot of writers, even if they are good at RP is not the goal, the story is the goal, but
Yeah.
for a lot of actors the RP is the goal. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. No, I like that. Okay, follow-up question for Brandon Prime. And it's interesting that you mentioned both theater and trust. So, like you both mentioned, you do a session zero and or some, something similar to that. But I find for me that in the kind of early sessions of a campaign, whether it's the first 5 sessions, first 10 sessions, whatever, like I think there's an innate sense of building trust between the players as you go, right? And so I'm curious if there's any deliberate um, actions that you take or conscious decisions that you make to try to encourage that trust and build that trust while your players are figuring out their characters and how they sound and how they act and how they interact with each other. Like, is this something you do deliberately? Do you let it build organically? Kind of what's your approach that way in like the very early stages of like a long form campaign? And like I said, Brandon Prime, I'm throwing it at you first.
Mhm. So at least for me, and I don't get to do this very often, sadly, but it
Mm,
is the thing that I think is the most useful way to do that, which is, um, and again, this gets to the idea that there are multiple stages in session zero,
mm,
which is the idea of session 0.5,
right.
um, where, especially if either your players don't know your GM or don't know each other very well, or
Mm,
if everybody's trying to learn the system, this is also very useful, but it's also very good for general trust building and general character building. And the thing that really cemented this idea for me was when we were running Girl by Moonlight for Speculate.
mm,
Because the book kind of coaxed me into this because the story for Girl by Moonlight asks the players to assume that you're playing from what is essentially season two of your character's narrative.
mm,
Um, so because there were a lot of backstory elements that I thought were particularly important, and I wanted the players to be in control of what that meant for their characters, we ran a private opening session before we started streaming the game that was what was the last thing that happened before the action happens.
mm.
So they get to establish what the relationships with each other as characters were, what the relationships were to NPCs that we established that were core for the narrative, without me telling them that this is the rule of this is absolutely what happened in this story in ways that might contradict what their intentions were for that. But also, it just meant instead of having just taken notes for their character and being prepared to perform those notes in the future, they already had some muscle memory about what that character's thoughts and feelings about certain situations were.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that I know, okay, we played this and I know how you care, I know how you feel about this thing happening. So I know whether, no, it, lines and veils notwithstanding, I know how you feel about this kind of action taking place in the story. So I'm going to pull that string again because no one saw me pull that string the first time because we didn't stream this.
Nice.
And that's very good for trust as well because those players are now developing what their characters' interactions with each other's are with other characters are and how those players feel about those interactions. They get to have over table conversations about how they feel about those decisions in private, knowing that it's not going to affect the flow of recording an episode for stream, and stuff like that. I feel like that's one of the best ways for that to happen organically. The only limit, of course, is time, making sure that everybody can meet for that. What is essentially not part of the game. But once it can happen, I think it's a very good place to start and give people an opportunity to like test out things about their character. Because the other thing about that session is what happens in that session doesn't need to be set in stone. It's our opportunity to find out. It's essentially backstage for the rest of the show, and I think that that's a good place for people to start figuring things out before they start officially rolling dice.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Eric, same question about it, like building trust early in the campaign and so forth.
I think it's about narrative investment
Oh,
is a
cool.
big
Yeah.
part of it. So I will incentivize. So like in the Dungeons and Dragons game, or a Dungeons and Dragons game, or any game really, I'll either do one-on-one prologues. And I'll design them around the individual character, or the individual player, and then I will make it a point to kind of seed in stuff so that they have that narrative buy-in. It's not just a group story. It's also they've also got their own particular personal agenda. So as soon as I give them like their own personal thing, the other thing that I do is I incentivize creating relationships with the other things and giving me backstory information. So like, tell me where your character lives, and I'll give you this extra use of advantage. Tell me how you met this character, and I'll give you this extra thing. So I give the players some, and the systems vary, but I give the players some incentive to invest in the narrative. So when I am inviting them to contribute to the narrative, then they're automatically gonna be more keyed in than if they're just like tuning out and they're like it's just an anonymous thing. And then the other part of that is just it's interpersonal work, right? Like so when you are in a group, when there's like 5 or 6 people or 4 or 3 or whatever, I do most of my tabletop playing in person, but I do some virtual. But either way, if I can like make eye contact or the creation of eye contact with an individual player, talk to the individual player, create a direct communication that's not just, okay, players, what are you doing? Instead, it'll be like, hey, John, what are you thinking right now?
Yeah.
John, what do you got? What kind of action do you want to take? And especially when I can tell that a player is maybe less invested because they're distracted or they haven't gotten the thing that's gonna be that spark that gets them super excited. Um, and so I target it and um, uh, play mug for the crowd. In
Yeah.
the story, I found very quickly that uh, my players respond well to cuddly animals. I'll just throw a cuddly animal in. As soon as you throw a cuddly animal in or something like that, they're interested in the cuddly animal, and then they've got narrative involvement, and then they trust you if you don't like do horrible things to the cuddly animal. You mug to the crowd. You throw out a cool thing that you know
Yeah.
that they're going to enjoy, and you don't because I've unfortunately played in games as a player where a dungeon master or a storyteller might be like, this is something your character's been looking for since day one, and you're like, yeah, and then he puts it out and just crushes it, for whatever sadistic reason that is. um, I don't do that. Like, I don't think that that's conducive to trust. So if I'm going to give them something, I don't take it away. I
Mhm.
play into it. I also try not to do the thing that is hard not to do, which is nullify a player choice just because
Mm.
it's inconvenient. And that comes up so much in the early part of the game because eventually, when that trust is built, that I've noticed what'll happen is players will go, "We can't do that, or that'll break the game, won't it, Eric?" And I'll be like, "Give me a minute.
Yeah.
No, I can handle it." Or could, maybe, and then like just even communicate that to them. Like, if we can get to the point where they can go like, "So if I go over here and do this thing, is that going to cause is that going to cause a problem?"
Mhm.
you know we're in
Yeah.
a good place, that we've
Yeah.
already started that conversation, but they have to trust me enough to be able to know to ask that question and know that I'm not going to use it against them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like the willingness to ask you and kind of check in with you as the DM to be like, like this is okay for you too. Like, yeah, it's a huge level of trust.
And I do a lot of questions. I just do a lot of questions.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
probably ask questions more than I say anything in a role-playing game.
I love that. Brandon Prime, I
So
saw you get excited about nullification.
So I wanted to briefly touch on that element of trust as well, because I don't tell this story very often because I try not to tell bad GM stories very often.
Do it.
But one of the experiences that I had in a game of D&D that very briefly almost turned me off of D&D for quite some time
No.
was I was playing in a friend's game, and I still like that friend and like that play group, but couldn't play with them for a while after this, where because of a series of bad rolls, while still otherwise achieving the goal that I had set out to achieve, my character died in a house fire.
Mm.
Um, and um, like in the middle of trying to save myself and stuff like that, I properly established to one of the other characters, if I don't make it, please get back to my loved ones and tell them that I cared about them, blah blah blah. Because
Yeah.
I had already set up previous sessions prior that the only reason I'm going on this adventure is to earn the trust of a former lover, and like now that that's not gonna happen, someone please send the message that I at least tried. And I'm trying very obviously to telegraph to my GM, this is my intent.
Mhm.
If I'm gonna die, let me die. We could have other character conversations later on. Just let me die on these terms. Instead, I become resurrected, become possessed by a demon, and then disappear from the campaign in the space of 6 minutes. And I'm
Oh
like,
no.
I don't know why any of these things are happening, and this is no longer fun for me. I'm like, I got in that moment that I feel like my GM's intention was, you have done too many cool stuff for your character to die. But like, I'm like, let me die. It's the cool stuff that makes the death worthwhile. Let's have the story engage in this way. And like, that experience is part of the reason why I care so much about how players and GMs, even if you don't want to be overt, because a lot of people feel like being overt about your character intent is a kind of metagaming. I can understand that on some level, but like, this our collective goal is to tell a story that we want to tell, not
Mhm.
any story that we can tell. And I feel like not having that proper engagement about what how to bridge my desires as a player and your intention as a GM to tell the kind of story that you want leads to situations where you resurrect a character who is ready to die, and sacrifice that player's continued engagement in the story as a result.
Mhm. Mhm. No, absolutely. Oh my God. Can't believe he brought you back. Holy crap. Yeah, so I think about setting boundaries. Like when you guys were talking about like the narrative intention and kind of the one-on-one interaction. I think immediately I started thinking about the current D&D game that I'm in that I mentioned at the start. Because what we have, I don't know if you guys have done this before with any of your games, but we have, like our live sessions that we play in, and the way that our DM has set it up is there's 12 of us as players, and we kind of sign up for sessions. So it's kind of a different group each time going off and exploring. Like it's a huge world, and we're all just kind of exploring with different groups and piecing together this kind of giant puzzle. But then we also have a Discord server, and in the Discord server, we can have like in character chats. We can kind of find each other, at our kind of like our home base, which is this manor that we were all drawn to. And so that's where we get a lot of our narrative intention from. That's where a lot of the bonds between our characters were formed, is in those in character threads. But that's where a lot of our trust has come from too, is like we'll be having some like incredibly fraught, sometimes like emotionally intense conversations between our characters. Meanwhile, like we're checking in with each other, through private messages, being okay, here's what I'm thinking, like my character's going this way, is that okay? Like I think like the scene's going to go in this direction, is that fine? Okay, like where's the line that you want to draw, that sort of thing. And very quickly built just this phenomenal level of care and trust between all of us as players for those threads, that then also translates into our like, even though we're virtual, our live sessions when we're actually playing, in a way that like I never experienced before with any other game, in a way that was just absolutely fabulous, because we were all going into it with the same sort of intention in a way that I think is pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to remind, we're, got 15 minutes left. I'm going to remind our lovely attendees, thanks for sticking with us. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will take any that we have in a couple of minutes. While I wait for that, this kind of, bounces off a little bit from Brandon Prime, your story you were just telling. We do what we can to keep things as positive as we can with our games, whether we're DMs or players, but it's not always sunshine and roses, obviously. So I'm curious how either of you navigate. In the question I sent you, I called it a problematic interaction, and that can mean a lot of different things. So how do you navigate those sort of either problematic or negative interactions between players when it happens? Because that can be a really tough thing to deal with. And I'll go Eric first for this one.
A lot of it is the proactive, establishing of trust and boundaries and communication up front can kind of help to head that off the pass. When that doesn't work, I've had to let players go from a group. You just have to have a difficult conversation. It's funny. There are friends that I've had again for like 20 years, and the most aggressive arguments we've ever had to do with role-playing games. Like your character was stealing my character's thunder. Like he got involved in my character's plot, and there were points when we were, when we were younger and maybe didn't understand ways to communicate better, where that could like lead to somebody storming off, like shouting, and there were friendships that were like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see this person because they took that magic item I really want. So perspective and experience in interpersonal stuff has really changed that. I think I just have a very frank conversation, and I have to have this sometimes as a fellow player, as much as a dungeon master or game master, and just be like, hey, I know you're into this, and I don't want to step on your immersion, but you're being a little rude right now. So, and just try to be honest with people. It's tricky because like you also don't want to be accusatory. I would definitely try to not do it in front of the rest of the group. I would definitely try to do it in a one-on-one kind of situation, and I would definitely try to do it in as non-confrontational way as possible. All of which is to say, that's if this is a person that's friendship comes before the role-playing game. If it's a role-playing game, and then this is a person that I've met, at a convention or for the first time, and they act out, I don't have time for that, guys. Like I will if you cross boundaries like that with me, I'll give you like a warning, and then if you do it again, I'm gonna ask you to leave. And it's no, like if it's a relationship I want to maintain, if it's important to keep the player in the group, I will make that effort. But if it's somebody that's just, like if it's a weekend game, if it's a one shot or something, it's just there's not, you got to remove the problem person because it's affecting everybody else's good time. We had a player in a game I remember that was such a problem that his character turned into the villain for every other player for the rest of the campaign. They all basically, their character motivation became get that guy, and that was in a way it kind of brought us together, because I kind of changed the nature of the campaign. I turned him into an NPC after we had to ask him to leave.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we just had to bounce him. But he had
Yeah.
got under everybody's skin so much that it became a problem. So
Mhm.
you don't want to be so sensitive to the problem player and resolving the problem player that it is destroying the experience for the non-problem players.
Yeah, no, that makes it. Yeah, I've had both of those myself, and yeah, like there's a level of going, too far to try to accommodate everybody when really it's just the dynamic is not working, and that's a really tough situation to be in too. But
Yeah.
it happens. Yeah. Brandon Prime, same question.
So I feel like I'm ill-equipped to answer this question because most of the sessions that I'm presently playing with are with people that either I consider friends because we're in the industry, or people who were otherwise friends before I joined their group. So if anyone's ever going to be the problem, it's probably going to be me. But like, there are things that I know I'm prepared to do.
Okay.
And a lot of that, very interestingly, comes back to the various stages in the session zero, which is that a lot of that initial process is also a process for those players to essentially communicate who they are and what their intentions are. And without that, it could become very difficult. Without getting a sense of who your players are before you actually play, you can feel blindsided by a decision that they made. That if you got an opportunity to just kind of chat with them outside of that game, you might get a better sense of what that person's intentions are. For instance, in that previous game that I had that one issue with, there was another player who likes being comic relief in their games, and I thought that was really cool already. And there was a certain manner of how they approached comedy that um it wasn't edgy or anything like that. It's just in the framework of D&D, there are certain mechanical implications that they just immediately thought were particularly hilarious. So they made a character with low wisdom whose engagement with other people's relationship to faith or to romance was immediately hostile. Like when folks were having a particularly religious experience, they would ask loaded questions about that religious experience. When people were trying to be timid about about a violent encounter that they could potentially de-escalate, did immediately lead to escalation, in ways that were frustrating one other character in particular. And the only reason they worked it out is because they had a private conversation about, well, what if that's our story? And that's the only reason why it worked. But if it hadn't worked, then the conversation would then be, I get why you think this is funny. Do you want to play with a playgroup that acknowledges that this might be funny? Because you're kind of getting in the way of a character's goals at this point. And that kind of let me know initially, like, even outside of the session zero, that there should be a point at the debriefing stage of every game, where part of your conversation is, how did you feel about other characters decisions in play? Did you feel like anybody was getting in the way of your potential interactions? um like, there was a player in one of my games who let me know that one of their frustrations very early on was they felt like they had shoehorned themselves into a character that they felt was not directly engaging with the story because of the abilities that they had chosen in the game.
Right.
And I was working with them on a regular basis to see, well, how do I give you the things that you need to feel like you're deliberately being engaged in this way, because I don't want you to feel like you are not that other people are getting more opportunities to be a part of the story over you. And while that's not the same, the answer to while that's not the same issue, the answer to that issue is the same, which is like when you have conversations with players about how we can bridge some of those issues, then that next session becomes hopefully either the better version of whatever happened last issue, or you get to immediately pinpoint, oh, something is wrong here that cannot be resolved this way. Maybe someone needs to be asked if this is the game that they want to play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an admonition either. Sometimes
Yeah.
the problem player isn't a problem player because they're a problem. They're a problem player because they're not in the game that they want to play. And that can't be helped.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. It comes back again to intentionality, right? Like, what game do you want to play? Eric, I saw your comment about debriefing. Do you want to jump in on that about how you've used debriefing?
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Prime already mentioned it. I find it's really helpful for a variety of reasons to, at the end of a game, just be like, how did that go for everybody? You know, like, what are you thinking about? I mean, I've asked as much as like, how are you feeling about the pace of this adventure? Do you want the pace to go up? How are you feeling about the number of dice rolls? Do you have enough time to roll your dice and get like a big, because some players, it's fun to throw the dice down, so am I giving you enough times to roll your dice? Are you having enough time to do this? And I mean, I tweak, session to session. I'll tweak the tone. I'll tweak the game plan,
Mm-hmm.
all based upon some of those conversations that I have. And informally, I'll just say it literally as we're packing up, how's everybody feeling about all the
Mm-hmm.
things? But also, like, more specifically, I will, one-on-one go to people and be like, hey, how you, especially if something, if I mean, I'm pretty good at reading a player. So if I can tell if a player seems like they've been less engaged, I'll talk to them one-on-one. And in general, I just do it on a fairly regular basis. It's just a matter of like, again, the more you keep the communication open, the more likely it is that somebody's going to volunteer information to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you just end up with a cooler game that way. Like if you're like, hey, what do you think? And they're like, you know what, I'd like more combat. Okay, I'll put in more combat, and you find that the energy goes up, the enthusiasm goes up. Or I'd like less combat. You find out what the group is into, you try
Mm-hmm.
to adjust it, and suddenly, like, it affects everything just by listening and making adjustments. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, I've done games where I thought I was going to do a really serious game, and it became clear that nobody was into a serious
Right.
game, and they
So
wanted to do
yeah.
something comedic. Cool,
Yeah.
you just roll with it, and you don't roll with it by as a this is why I think it's super valuable for writers to participate in role playing games. You don't get beholden to what you expect the plot to be. You let the plot evolve.
Yeah.
You let the plot go where the plot needs to go.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love
And
that.
debriefing is part of the way you figure that out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and then see if you need to, I was gonna say course correct. That's not quite the right phrase, but if you need to, dovetail in a different direction or some such. We got about 2 minutes left, and so this has been phenomenal. I feel like we just keep going forever. The last question I'm going to throw at you is just if there's one last piece of advice or an additional tool that you haven't mentioned yet that you think is worth mentioning before we head out, and also where our audience folks can find you on the interwebs. While you're thinking of that, I'm gonna mention one thing, which is again what we're doing. One of the things we're doing in the D&D game I already mentioned is in that Discord server. And there's lots of ways that you can do this. We set up a thread that our DM calls the Flowers thread, which is specifically for people to shout out particularly excellent role playing by somebody else. So like I love this moment where you did this, where you really leaned into this aspect of your character, or that was such a phenomenal scene, or like I can't like, but always positive stuff. So that sort of positive encouragement and reinforcement stuff, and it's been like fabulous just to kind of like show each other some love. So some sort of aspect of that I think is excellent for a game. So yeah, I'll go Brandon Prime. Any last advice or suggestions, and also where folk can find you on the interwebs?
I feel like the only other thing that I can add at this point is the purpose, first and foremost, of playing an RPG is to have fun. Um, sometimes that sometimes that will trump even the intentions of story that you have in mind, and that means that that means not only having a conversation with your players about making sure that they are having fun even at the expense of the story that you had in mind, but being able as a GM to have a conversation about whether you are also having fun, because this is also about you as well, and find ways to bridge that for yourself, because if you are not having fun, your players will notice, because the story will start devolving in a way that cannot be helped. But as for me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at The Rising Tides. That's TITHES. I have a newsletter at brandonobrien.xyz, which also has a link to my other social media stuff. And of course, you can find Speculate at speculatesf.com, and streaming on twitch.tv/Arvan Elleron. In fact, literally at the top of the hour, I will be on twitch.tv/Arvan Elleron, so we can play one of our Speculate games. I am playing in a game of Court of Blades that is being GM'd by our good friend Mike Underwood. So if you aren't doing anything else for Flights of Foundry, you can join me there.
That's right. It's Friday night. Okay, Eric, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Eric Grove, ERIK Grove, like the trees, just about anywhere on Twitter.com, my website. My main tip is just reward what's going well. Give players cool stuff. For when they I used to play a lot of World of Darkness games, Vampire the Masquerade, when I was younger, and there was always like a reward, an extra experience point reward for they played their character well. I always just, if somebody's doing what you want them to do in the game, if it's role playing forward, if it's just they brought the good snacks, give them something. Just give the player something that says that you appreciate and you recognize their contribution they're making to the game. I think it's really recognized by the players, and it creates a really positive environment.
Awesome. I love that. This is awesome, guys. And again, I'm Brandon Crilly. Easiest place to find me is brandoncrilly.com. It's got links to the social media I barely use, and the rest of my stuff on there. And yeah, we are out of time, unfortunately, but this was a blast. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Eric. This was so much fun. And thank you, folks, for attending, and enjoy the rest of Flights of Foundry.